A top AEW star looks set to leave the company after his contract is expired and AEW decides not to pick up the extension. CM Punk gets his World Championship opportunity this coming Sunday at All Out. The Elite advance to the finals of the AEW Trios World Championship Tournament. A former Impact Wrestling and WWE star returns to AEW on Dynamite last night. Hangman Page is going to team up with the Dark Order in the Trios Tournament. Eddie Kingston and Sammy Guevara, we have the latest on their backstage beef, more matches added to All Out, and where is Full Gear going to emanate from this year? All this and more in today's jam-packed AEW news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into today, and I'm not just saying those words today. We have a jam-packed show as we head into All Out this coming weekend. So let's get straight into the biggest story, and that possibly is not something that happened on Dynamite. Actually, one person who could be leaving All Elite Wrestling in the near future. It's a very surprising name, one Bobby Fish. Yeah, Bobby Fish could be leaving AEW in the very near future, if reports are to be believed. Now, this comes from a big report from Fightful Select last night. Sean Ross Sapp, during Dynamite, when it was on the air on TBS, broke the story that several within AEW have been told that Bobby Fish's AEW contract will not be renewed. It appears that Bobby Fish's time within All Elite Wrestling may be coming to an end. Now, Fish recently has been missing from AEW programming, of course. Now, the main reason for that is now clear. It's not so much to do with Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly's injuries. It's actually because Fish's contract is coming up and he will likely be finishing with the company when it does, with the deal not being renewed by All Elite Wrestling. Now, Fish last appeared on the August 3rd edition of AEW Dynamite when the Undisputed Elite returned. That segment saw Fish, Adam Cole, and Kyle O'Reilly betray the Young Bucks to, at the time, one would suggest and speculate, seemingly launch some sort of program to culminate with the Undisputed Era facing off against the Elite, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. But they haven't been seen since. Now again, the assumption was it was because of the injuries to Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly. We know specifically Adam Cole returning from a concussion, also has got a torn labrum, he's rehabbing it, so that's why we haven't really seen them on Dynamite since then. We don't know too much about Kyle O'Reilly's injury, but the assumption was they just weren't on because there was a couple of injuries there and they were letting the Elite do their thing in the tournament. They would confront them after they win the tournament, seemingly at All Out. That was the plan going forward. So this came as a big surprise. Now, Fish hasn't even been with the company super long, less than a year. He made his debut in 2021 on the October 6th episode of Dynamite. He unsuccessfully challenged Sammy Guevara for the TNT Championship. He then subsequently signed a deal with the company, faced top names like Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, and after that brief singles run, he aligned with Cole and the Young Bucks before Kyle O'Reilly arrived on the Holiday Bash episode of Dynamite last December. Now, since then, he's competed in several matches alongside O'Reilly, in addition to a few single matches as well. He's been used sparingly in recent months, again, perhaps in part and most likely due to the injuries to both Cole and Kyle O'Reilly. He last wrestled for AEW at the July taping of AEW Dark Elevation. He since, though, has been taking bookings on the independent scene. He defeated Yui Amura at Defies Doomsdayers on August 20, which is quite interesting because prior to obviously signing with AEW was with NXT, but he hasn't actually taken really any or many independent bookings during the time that he's been with AEW. So this is, again, another indication he perhaps is on the way out. Now, of course, prior to his arrival in AEW, Fish was featured as a member of the Undisputed Era in NXT for several years before he was released along with several others in a cost-cutting move on August 6, 2021. There he won the NXT Tag Team Championship twice. Of course, he's won the Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling championships on several occasions as well in a tag team with Kyle O'Reilly and others. So certainly, this is a really surprising one. Again, that feels to me very, very WCW and very WWE. You know, they do this big angle to seemingly set up this big match that they're building towards, which is, again, the Undisputed Era versus the Elite, this huge match that when the Wednesday Night Wars were going on, you thought, oh, it's a big crossover match, and they can't even do it now because they're not going to pick up Bobby Fish's contract. And again, it's not because, Bobby Fish has decided to leave AEW. No, it's just because they've decided, for whatever reason, they're not going to pick up his contract. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand Bobby Fish. He's an older guy. I understand that he's had his injury troubles as well over the past couple of years, particularly when he was in WWE. I believe he's also had an injury or two in AEW. But frankly, considering the Trios Championship felt like it was being implemented for the Elite, but again, to eventually build to that Undisputed Era match, is odd. It just feels really odd. We haven't really seen the Undisputed Era as truly a trio in AEW. Really, we've seen a couple of matches on a couple of occasions, but Kenny Omega left so quickly after Full Gear last year. Kyle O'Reilly wasn't even around yet, so they couldn't. They felt like they've had this opportunity to do it. I mean, they've had plans to want to do the Undisputed Era versus the Elite for well over a year, and they haven't been able to do it until now. Now that everyone's back, they're not going to do it because they're not going to extend Bobby Fish's contract. So, of course, we'll wait and see. It's been far from confirmed by AEW that is the case, but for Sean Ross Sapp to go on the record about this story suggests that there is certainly something there. So we'll keep an eye out when it comes to Bobby Fish and his AEW future. Let's move on and talk about Dynamite last night. Of course, it was the Dynamite Go Home show to All Out this coming weekend, and the match we knew was going to be confirmed anyway has now officially been confirmed. CM Punk will get his opportunity to face off against Jon Moxley once again this coming Sunday at All Out for the AEW World Championship. Now, the show opened last night with Moxley coming out to the ring, running down CM Punk, talking about being the undisputed AEW World Champion. This then led to Moxley getting a contract out of his pocket, putting it in the ring and saying, it's an open contract. I will be defending my AEW World Championship at All Out against anyone. Whoever gets this contract, whoever signs it, I will face at All Out. So he finishes the promo, goes to the back, and out came Ace Steel, which was certainly quite curious. Now, again, some people maybe not well inclined or didn't know really who Ace Steel was, but commentary, I think, did a really good job of putting over who he was and most specifically his relationship with CM Punk. So Ace Steel came out, took the contract, put it in his back pocket, and went to the back. Now, later in the broadcast, Punk came to the ring to address his hometown crowd. We'll talk about some aspect of it in a second. But he apologized for the loss the previous week, and he seemed downtrodden, and he seemed, like defeated, essentially. And Steel came to the ring, walked between the ropes, and encouraged the crowd to remind CM Punk just who he is. Steel and the fans' encouragement really lit a fire under Punk, and it must be said, I thought Ace Steel's promo here was phenomenal. Absolutely brilliant. He cut a heartfelt, emotional promo. It was real. It was raw. He slapped CM Punk in the face. He dropped an F-bomb, which I was watching and thinking, we just get a report saying those at Warner Media Discovery are saying tone down the language, which again some people would say was lost in translation. The quote got misinterpreted at the backstage meeting last week, and essentially it was just don't fly too close to the sun, i.e. don't swear too much on television, and that's exactly what Ace Steel did. And he's office, he's a producer. He slapped CM Punk and dropped an F-bomb, and remember who the F you are, blah blah blah. Now I think on TBS it was bleeped out or censored. On the feed that I was watching, which was the fight one, it was not censored whatsoever. I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. Again, I thought it was a great promo and really enjoyed it. That seemingly lit a fire under Punk. He grabbed the contract, signed it, walked through the crowd, said this was Chicago, and taunting Moxley, and got the crowd certainly fired up. And the rematch is now on. The match is official. The main event of All Out in Chicago will be CM Punk versus Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship, and I expect CM Punk to win. Now, it must be said, this was a really fascinating part of it, is when CM Punk initially came out, obviously fans were cheering for him, it was his hometown, but there was somewhat of a mixed reaction to it as well, because as CM Punk was detailing the finer details of his surgery that he had on his foot, he mentioned that he had 16 screws implanted in his foot. Whilst he was saying this, audibly you could hear it. There was one fan, or a couple of them, certainly in the crowd, chanting Colt Cabana, Colt Cabana, Colt Cabana. Now, of course, we know the history that is there. We know the animosity, the beef. We know the beef that's still ongoing between CM Punk and Colt Cabana, and how it's dividing the dressing room right now. Some within AEW aren't happy that CM Punk essentially tried to force Colt Cabana out the company, and Cabana was going to be forced out the company until Tony Khan re-signed him and said, you can go to Ring of Honor. But some people were on Punk's side of all of this. Nevertheless, one fan was chanting, or a couple of them were chanting Colt Cabana, because just like CM Punk, he's from Chicago, so I'm sure there were Colt Cabana fans there, absolutely. So whilst that was going on, he's chanting Colt Cabana, Colt Cabana, Colt Cabana, and as CM Punk said, when he mentioned about the 16 screws in his foot, he said, which, real quick, is 16 more times than this fat guy has ever gotten screwed in his life. And the fans went crazy and went rah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. He then admitted he probably shouldn't have said that, before pondering if he returned too soon from his injury. I thought Punk dealt with it well. Again, it's funny that if someone chants the name Colt Cabana, it gets really under CM Punk's skin, clearly. But it is what it is. That whole drama is what it is. That's the baggage you get when you sign CM Punk and you have Colt Cabana on the same roster. That's always going to be the problem. People have always been fascinated what's going to happen if Punk goes to AEW because Colt Cabana's already there. And this is what you get. When you rub two sticks together, what do you get? You get fire, you get a spark, and that's exactly what we keep getting about this whole Colt Cabana CM Punk issue. Nevertheless, again, we knew we were getting towards CM Punk versus Jon Moxley at All Out. That was always going to happen. It must be said, I think commentary did their best, and the broadcast last night did their best to try and make you fired up for this match. But I'm going to be honest, I am less fired up going into Sunday's match than I was last week. Because last week, whilst it's not the first time ever CM Punk and Jon Moxley have faced off, it was in AEW and it felt like a bigger match. Sunday's match does feel like a rematch. Sunday's match feels more predictable. The match last Wednesday felt less predictable. And I think that, I mean, obviously time will tell when it comes to the numbers for All Out and for Dynamite this coming week too, but my impression in the more immediate future is that booking gamble by Tony Khan and those involved to have that match on Dynamite last week, I don't know if it's paid off, and I don't think it was the right move. And again, that was my initial reaction anyway, is because I'm more of a traditionalist. Call me crazy, but I think you should build up to big matches and save them for pay-per-view, not give them away on free TV. Yes, you can spike a rating, but you've got to keep them. And am I expecting the same number of people that tuned in last week for Dynamite to tune in this week? I don't know. I really don't know. It's a go-home show, I guess, and there is a bit of buzz to one of AEW's biggest shows of the year, maybe, but I'm less excited going into that match Sunday. Unless they can do something else, I don't see it. I don't see it. But let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Also, the main event last night saw a fantastic main event, it must be said, as Kenny Omega and the Elite, as we spoke about earlier, defeated Will Ospreay and United Empire as well. Thought it was fantastic. Really, really good match. Eventually, in the closing stages of the match, Kenny Omega nailed the V-Trigger and the One-Winged Angel on Kyle Fletcher to secure the victory for his team, and they've now qualified for the final of the AEW World Trios Tournament. Of course, we'll talk about who their opponents could be in just a second. And obviously, probably my favorite thing about the match wasn't necessarily the spots. The spots were fine. Again, it's not super my style of wrestling. I'm a bit more of a traditionalist in that thing. I prefer less choreography, more it looks like they're trying to hurt each other, but again, it's horses for courses, it's people's preference. But what I did really enjoy was Kenny Omega's entrance. Kenny Omega has the pomp and circumstance as he has his entrance, doesn't he? And Justin Roberts says all of that kind of stuff, North Carolina, and lists Kenny Omega's accomplishments. But what was great was that Justin Roberts, every accomplishment he named about Kenny Omega was a slight to Will Ospreay. He sold more shirts than Will Ospreay. He's had better matches than Will Ospreay. He sold out the Tokyo Dome more times than Will Ospreay. He's better looking than Will Ospreay. It was just good. It was just good stuff. I love clever stuff, so I thought it was fantastic. Now, it must be said, after the match, actually, there was a bit of drama after the match, after the show went off the air, because Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher, and Mac Davis rushed to the ring to carry out a vicious attack on the Elite using steel chairs while executing their signature moves on the AEW originals. This included Ospreay hitting a Stormbreaker on Nick Jackson and a hidden blade on Omega. According to fans at the arena, Don Callis stood outside the ring and watched helplessly. Michael Nakazawa and Brandon Cutler didn't get involved either. Now, AEW social media have released the official post-show footage, questioning if the Bucks and Omega will be 100% going into their match this coming Sunday at All Out. So it appears that this rivalry will continue at some point. It feels like this was Ospreay and United Empire, sort of, or Aussie Open, going back to New Japan because they have their commitments in New Japan, but just kind of saying this is the teaser, this is a seed for something that will blossom later on. Whether that's another them facing off in a trios championship Championship match, whether it's Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay inside of an AEW ring or Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay in the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Kingdom. That's a real possibility as well. They're building towards something. They've been building towards something between Omega and Ospreay for a really, really, really long time, clearly. So that was the sort of the pause on it for now, but the seeds have been firmly planted for later on, no doubt about that. Now, last night on Dynamite also saw the return to AEW, a former WWE and Impact Wrestling star, W. Morrissey. He's back in All Elite Wrestling. Now, the segment was the Wingmen. They came to the ring with their picketing signs and held a protest about their lack of television time. Out came W. Morrissey, his music hit, and he sauntered to the ring where he quickly laid waste to all four men. As W. Morrissey stood tall in the ring, Stokely Hathaway walked down to the ring to join him. He handed Morrissey his business card. Morrissey and Hathaway exchanged a nod, walked up the ramp. Tony Schiavone, poor Tony, was there to try and figure out what was going on, and Stokely Hathaway got right in his face. Right in his face. So it looks like W. Morrissey is going to be part of this faction, seemingly that Stokely Hathaway is building, or part of his clientele list that he's building in AEW. And good for him. I'm a big W. Morrissey fan. I expected after he left Impact to land in one of the big promotions. I really did feel like, we know how it ended for him in WWE, but frankly, he has turned his life around. He's completely clean and sober, and his run in Impact Wrestling has just gone to show what a star he can be. And people forget about W. Morrissey. This is the thing, that WWE saw huge promise in him. Daniel Bryan returned from retirement, and the first person he feuded with after his WrestleMania return was W. Morrissey, because they felt there was money in this guy, because as the old saying goes, he's 7 foot tall, you can't teach that, he's money. So I don't know if the WWE offer is on the table. You feel like maybe with Triple H now being in charge, I don't know if that feels less likely, I'm not sure, but I think AEW is a good spot for him. I do, so I'm really glad to see him landed a big company, and I really do think he can do big things. Rampage this Friday is live on TNT, a rare live episode of Rampage, and the main event will see Hangman Page team up with the Dark Order because John Silver and Alex Reynolds lost their partner but gained a new one. It was announced in a backstage segment that the Dark Order's 10 would be unable to compete in the semi-final of the Trios tournament on Friday, putting into question their match against Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends. Now, initially, Evil Uno volunteered to take 10's spot in the match, but he was ambushed by Andrade El Idolo and struck repeatedly by crutches that were being used by 10. Now, moments later, Silver and Reynolds says to Tony Schiavone, well, we don't really have anyone else, and because we don't have anyone else, we're just going to have to be a 2-on-3 match. Hangman Page showed up to the scene and offered his services, and it seems that he will be their tag team partner to face off against Cassidy and the Best Friends Friday, which clearly means, what are they building up to? They're building up to Kenny Omega and the Elites versus Hangman Page and the Dark Order. The seeds have been planted for a while, of course. They did that thing prior to Kenny Omega returning where Hangman Page was talking to the Bucks. Of course, we know the history between Hangman Page and Kenny Omega, former AEW World Tag Team Champions. Of course, they had that year-long rivalry where Hangman Page sunk to the bottom of the depths of despair, and eventually Hangman Page was the one to defeat Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship just a year after Kenny Omega beat him to qualify for an AEW World Championship match against Jon Moxley, which he later won. So I guess the next chapter in this prolonged story between Hangman Page and Kenny Omega will come at All Out, and it will most likely come, I think, with Kenny Omega and the Elite winning the Trios Championship. Possibly, though, we could see maybe Hangman Page turn on the Dark Order. Maybe that's where they go, and Hangman Page reunites with the Elite, turning heel in the process. If the Elite are heels, which I don't think they are, so I don't really know how that would work, but nevertheless, that's the match that's going to take place on Rampage on Friday. Now, Eddie Kingston was recently suspended, of course, due to a backstage incident in which he pie-faced Sammy Guevara. Now, this led to a huge amounts of different stories and details about Guevara going off script and calling Eddie Kingston a fat piece of shit, and also saying that there was discussion about Sammy Guevara being difficult to work with and all this kind of stuff. Well, it appears this backstage drama has now come to an end, at least for now anyway. Fightful Select Sean Ross Sapp is reporting that Guevara and Kingston have buried the hatchet backstage. The pair decided to move on from their problems after having a conversation and shaking hands ahead of last night's edition of Dynamite. Now, it's unknown exactly what was said. Fightful also wrote that they were told by a source that Kingston has fully assumed responsibility for his actions that caused him to be suspended. Another source told them that both men are apparently open to working together in the future and even taking leveraging of the news of their backstage rift and possibly making an angle out of it. So Turning a shoot into a work, brother. That's what they're trying to do. Now, of course, they were building towards a match at this Sunday's All Out pay-per-view after Kingston had issued a challenge for a match between the two at the beginning of August. Of course, that match is no longer happening. It's no longer part of AEW's plans for this weekend. Kingston is now set to face Tomohiro Ishii this Sunday at the Now Arena on the All Out 0 Hour pre-show. Whether Guevara is going to be featured remains to be seen, but the drama and the beef between the two is now over. Speaking of All Out, we have some more matches announced for this Sunday's pay-per-view, rather. One being a trios match, seeing the House of Black face off against Miro, Darby Allin, and Sting. That match was announced last night on Dynamite. Another match announced for the 0 Hour pre-show will see the AEW All Atlantic Championship be on the line as Kip Sabian returns to AEW in-ring action to face off against the AEW All Atlantic Champion Pac. Another match that has been now officially been confirmed are the participants of the Casino ladder match to take place at All Out on Sunday. The competitors will be Andrade El Idolo, Rey Fenix, Penta El Zero Miedo, Dante Martin, Roosh, Ring of Honor Pure Champion Wheeler Yuta, and Ring of Honor World Champion Claudio Castagnoli. Another name will be in the match, that is the Mystery Joker. There are a few possibilities as to who this Joker could be. Of course, we don't actually know. There hasn't been any reports about it. A lot of people talking about MJF. Certainly a possibility. MJF could be that guy, wins the match, and therefore wins an opportunity at the AEW World Champion, which chances are it's going to be CM Punk. So imagine closing the pay-per-view with CM Punk winning the title, but then being confronted by MJF as the next opponent. That makes a load of sense. The other one that I think is a possibility is a name that has been reported to be returning in the near future, that being one Ring of Honor Television World Champion Samoa Joe. Of course, Joe has just finished filming, so it's a real possibility that Joe could be the name that enters that ladder match this coming Sunday. Finally, Full Gear. We're talking about All Out, but another pay-per-view set to come this year is Full Gear. And according to Fightful Select, several AEW talent and staff members were informed earlier this month that the tentative plan for Full Gear was to run the event in Newark, New Jersey. Fightful sources weren't given an exact date for the event, though the past 3 years Full Gear has fallen either in the first or second Saturday in November. Now, as noted by Sean Ross Sapp, AEW has previously been to Newark twice, running the Prudential Center last September, 1 week before AEW's Grand Slam edition of Dynamite at Arthur Ashe Stadium, and once again on January 5th, the first episode of Dynamite, which of course aired on TBS. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that one. But it looks like Full Gear is going to be taking place in Newark, New Jersey. Well, there you go, guys. Jam-packed edition of an AEW news show today. Let me know your thoughts on all of the AEW news stories in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.